Okay, everybody, welcome back. And this is the final session of today's program, which is going to be an exciting session. You have in front of you a declaration which has been drafted by civil society. Let me give you a brief introduction on the process that has led to the declaration coming into place before handing over to my colleagues here, a stellar team of civil society representatives who will take you through the various aspects of this declaration. Ever since that SDG16 was reviewed in 2019 for the first time, civil society has come together to review, discuss, and evaluate the state of affairs of implementation of SDG16 and other related SDGs. These discussions have led earlier to the issuance of statements in 2019 and 2021, which were the previous Rome Civil Society declarations. In context of this year's Rome SDG16 conference, we again brought civil society together to reflect on the current state of implementation, but also to reflect on how the impacts of geopolitical changes around us in the world are affecting the SDG agenda, and in particularly with a focus on SDG16, of course. We coupled that with an online workshop over the last couple of weeks that brought together civil society representatives from across the globe, and also issued a survey statement through which we were seeking inputs for this declaration. In front of you, you will find the result of that consultation process, which will now be alluded upon by my colleagues. The resulting document is the 2022 Rome Civil Society Declaration SDG16 Plus in Peril, an urgent call to action to safeguarding commitments for peaceful, just and inclusive societies, in which civil society is identifying areas for amplified actions that are needed to safeguard commitments for the implementation and accountability of SDG16 Plus in 2022 and beyond. Let me now introduce the first speaker, who will share the headlines of this declaration, which is Ms. Jyotsna Mohan from IIDA in India. Jyotsna, floor is yours.
Thank you, Peter. 3 years ago, I delivered a statement presenting the original Rome Civil Society Declaration right here on SDGs at the first SDG16 Plus conference. In our statement, I mentioned that the world was off track and falling behind in implementing the 2030 agenda and SDG16 Plus. Sadly, 3 years later, SDG16 Plus is in peril, and the international community and the government have fallen even further behind in realizing SDG16 Plus. We find ourselves in a world today that has seen a worrying increase in attack on human rights and justice defender. We have seen additional shrinking of civic space in countries all around the world, with the COVID-19 pandemic only worsening this trend. We see a disturbing rise in authoritarianism in many countries, including in countries that have traditionally been long-time champions of civil society. We see widening of structural inequalities within society, with an increase in exclusion, discrimination, and marginalization, leading to a rise in people being left behind. We collectively face unprecedented humanitarian and peace-building challenges during a time where the recovery from the COVID-19 still hangs in the balance. The 2022 Asia and Pacific SDG Progress Report notes that at the current rate of implementation, many governments in Asia will not achieve the SDGs until 2065. Should we call it Agenda 2065 then? This is simply unacceptable, and we must do better in taking urgent action now. Sadly, today these issues are more critical and need more urgent attention as ever, with increased conflict situation in South and East Asia, financial crises in Sri Lanka, and ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. Countries are spending more even today, even before on military spending, and the trend to continue to worsen over time due to ongoing conflicts and insecurity. All of this results from a severe lack of political will by the governments to address peace, justice, and governance issues, both at home and at the international level. Faced with a wide range of once-in-a-generation challenges, these emerging and worsening crises have made it clear that SDG 16 plus is in peril, and the risk of failure is as real as ever. It is clearer that ever that we must take action to recommit to SDG 16 plus now to avoid countless more people being left behind. Thank you so much. Now I request my colleague Rita to take on.
Thank you very much, Jyotsna. Thank you for the space. I would like to draw two important points and bring it to our attention here as key points coming from the civil society. First is on the civic space. We all know that without civil society or a strong civil society, there will be no checks and balances and accountability. So the role of the civil society is to call out government and the international community to action, and their voices are very crucial. The need to protect civic space is crucial for effective prevention of conflict and the fight against impunity. In my country, South Sudan, for instance, there is an increased surveillance on the activities of civil society. You will need to have a security clearance to conduct an activity, and as well as they will have representatives of the national security actually within the meetings organized by civil society. As if that is not already a challenge, now they have also introduced a more restrictive measure that civil society organizations have to submit the concept notes to the Commission for Relief and Rehabilitation for approval before you can conduct any activity within the country. So as civil society, we call on the international or on the transitional government in South Sudan to expedite the review of the NGO Act that would then give civil society the independence to drive accountability for the sustainable development agenda, including on critical issues. And the second point I would like to raise is about capacity strengthening on the SDG 16 itself. Civil society is continuously evolving with the youth and women groups and others coming in the space. While most of the engagements relate to SDG 16, there is no particular mention of the SDG itself. In South Sudan, for instance, we are currently going through a transition where a number of reforms is supposed to happen. For instance, the transitional security arrangement, where there will be training and graduation of unified forces, the permanent constitution making process, transitional justice, and eventually elections. All these reforms or all these processes falls under SDG 16, but little is literally being said about this SDG. Therefore, we call on partners and donors to enhance a partnership with civil society organizations to ensure ongoing meaningful engagement with civil society and ensure that local actors are placed at the center of decision-making for development cooperation on national and international stages. And also the UN agencies and diplomatic mission have the responsibility to amplify the voices of civil society in ensuring that the space for their engagement in different UN processes. Most of the time, civil society raises issues, but it is not being amplified enough. So therefore, we urge the UN to continuously amplify the voices of civil society. And finally, to ensure that civil society have the means and capacity to implement effective peace building process and act as key agents of change for the Agenda 2030. Thank you. So I call on my colleague Margaret to pick on after me.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. My name is Margaret and I'm from Nigeria. When we hear Nigeria, the first thing that comes to most people's mind concerning insecurity is the Boko Haram. We have the incidents of girls that were abducted from school, trains that are being shot at. Insecurity in Nigeria is very high. So insecurity in Nigeria has risen sharply over the last few years. In almost every region of my country, there are two major security issues, which are communities through civil unrest and kidnapped for ransom. We are avoiding non-essential travels now due to the unpredictable security situation throughout my country and the significant risk of terrorism, crime, intercommunal clashes, armed attacks, and kidnappings, just to name a few. The total security statistics of my country is about 450,000, which is guarding about 200 million. This is very grossly inadequate and could not most times guarantee efficient security architecture and protection of lives and property. I'm going to look at the interlinkages of the SDGs. Civil society's practical experience in implementing the SDG16 at all levels has shown us the critical role and interlinkages that SDG16 has with every other SDG. In order to effectively deliver on these interlinkages, governments must provide and support safe, transparent, and inclusive platforms for coordination across the society. Across the 2030 agenda, the various goals interrelate. SDG 16, being a key enabler for progress on the other goals, is included in the agenda. SDG 1, no poverty, and SDG 7, affordable and clean energy, show the most relationships with other SDGs. And SDG 12, responsible consumption and production, is the goal mostly associated with trade-offs. The pandemic, as we all know, has more than ever made it glaring the importance of tackling the pandemic through a truly global response to COVID-19. An equal and fair vaccine rollout is important. Vaccine equality should be taken care of by production and fair distribution of COVID-19 vaccines. We are all aware, ladies and gentlemen, that in a bid to achieve vaccine equality, the World Health Organization selected the first 6 African countries, my country, Nigeria, being one of them, were included that will receive the technology needed to produce mRNA vaccines on the continent. Ladies and gentlemen, without peace, there cannot be sustainable development. Thank you very much. And I hand over to my colleague, Hibo Yassin.
Hello, my name is Hibo. I'm left with the last points of our call for action. Before starting, I wanted to thank all the people who organized and our colleague from the civil society. And I want to thank all the people who spoke in session 2, because it was like they were talking to me, starting with Giuseppe Busia, Professor Stelzer. Sorry if I am making mistake with the names. And lastly, Paulo Guerrero. It was like they were talking with me. And with that in mind, apologies if I'm not diplomatic. In our call for action, we invite you in the spirit of true partnership to introspect on what we put in our call for action and to do more to integrate and broaden your approach to human rights, peace, security, and locate human rights at the center of conflict prevention. It's also important to mention here the need for human rights based approach when it comes to the pandemic recovery responses and strategies. Each country has its own specialities, and this must be taken into consideration, especially when we are dealing with countries in conflict. Normally, the actions are translated into projects, but let us not remember that people and countries are not projects. And let us not fall into this temptation. I will give you some examples when it comes to Somalia. In Somalia, when it comes to project and peace building actions or help for this country, we normally go to the temptation of seeing this Somalia as a project. I will challenge you to audit your actions when it comes to Somalia. And I had, during the discussion, listened to some of the speakers, and I didn't have time to react, but I will do it here. The colleague, Cindy McCain, was talking about the access to justice, food security, rule and law. My reflection or question to her could have been how you work this nexus when everything is missing, when there is no food security in the case of Somalia, when the access to justice, when people want to have justice, they go to Al-Shabaab instead of going to the government. When women are asked to give sexual favors to have food. I would like to have this question or this reflection left to IDLO, FAO, and WFP if they have to discuss on how to do this. There was another discussion on peace building funds. There was a colleague from UNDP, I think, I'm not sure. No, it was the UNDPPA. I would like to have an audit when it comes to peace building funds and Somalia, and how the peace building funds become a rally between UN agencies of who will grab the peace funds, and along with them they bring their CSOs, because in some countries we are owned. If you talk nicely, you are owned. And I will conclude on all the actions said. Without these concrete commitments from the member states on their ambition and action on this half of implementation towards 2030, the international community is doomed to fail if they don't deliver on the SDGs by 2030. And this will be the same, if they don't do that, we will have the same shortcomings when it comes to the MDGs. We, as the civil society, this document was worked on by the 270 organizations. We are ready to raise awareness. Of course, we are ready more than ever to track and audit progress. We are ready to engage and strengthen communities, especially those further behind. But we expect also you as member states to come with new, meaningful and concrete and ambitious commitments. As civil society, we pledge to do our part, but we also urge you to do the same. Before concluding, I would like to mention, I didn't capture all what he said sorry if I still take the example of session 2, because it was talking about anti-corruption and transparency. the colleague Giuseppe Bussia said, in difficult times, we might leave some issues behind, and I will jump to Italian, but he said, ma non bisogna trascurare le cose basiche, perché poi si finisce nel lasciare i più deboli a prendere tutto a carico loro. The institutions need to look far. They need to see that. I would like to see these principles applies to countries in conflict. And I will conclude to say, state attenti perché vi terremo d'occhio. Thank you.
A big thank you to all the speakers. With this, the declaration is now live, and I invite all of you to read the declaration and let us jointly address the issues that are put on paper here. And I hope that you will join us in a discussion to address those issues, as the call to action is urgent and we need to act now. Thank you very much.